We have sold and distributed almost 100 million of these little guys. Changed the way not just Austin, not just Texas, but literally the world talks about cancer. It is a closed loop AI, so it cannot hallucinate. Ellis only knows what I teach it. We're building things inside of Livestrong today that are little micro businesses, and those are our mission programs. The goal is that each one of these becomes a self-sustaining entity. We won't become a tech company. We're using tech to scale our impact.
Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. I explore how ecosystems are built and how tech shapes the future. Austin is the frontier. It's where innovation takes root and new myths are made. Join what's next. Suzanne, welcome to Austin Next.
Jason, thanks so much for having me.
So it's interesting because I've obviously known about Livestrong with the bracelets, and I want to kind of get a little bit about where that is today, because I think it was an interesting kind of peak and valley with that. But I also didn't quite realize until after I moved to Austin that you guys are also based here. So there's a lot of connection there and why, and I think the history of that. But I think let's just kind of start off big picture, like what's the mission, vision? What is Livestrong doing, and what is it obviously besides, the bracelet?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a pretty big question, but
they're only easier from there, or actually they're harder. Yeah.
They only get easier, right? So we were born in Austin almost 30 years ago now, which is pretty amazing. 2027 will be 30 years. I'm born in Austin, and Lance was living here and had that cancer diagnosis as a cyclist, wrote that book, It's Not About the Bike, and really changed the way not just Austin, not just Texas, but literally the world talks about cancer. Created this field of survivorship. So when I say that today, people are like, "Nuh-uh, really?" Like, yeah, really. So imagine, if you can go back, we're both old enough, but we go back and go back 28 years, and nobody was talking about cancer the way that they do today. It was that whisper in cocktail parties. It wasn't, oh, she's got cancer, right? It wasn't, how is she living, or how is he surviving? How is he thriving? What things are going on in your life? There were no patient navigators at oncologist offices. There were no resources and nonprofits out there that were providing help for people who were trying to figure out what life looks like after a cancer diagnosis. And Livestrong really brought that to, like I said, to the entire cancer community and world. The thing that really sets us apart is that we're not focused on the cure. We don't provide funding for research. We know we have great partner organizations who are doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
All around the world. And they're investing billions of dollars to one day end this disease and to cure it forever. Our focus is from the moment of diagnosis and then for the rest of your life. So we consider a survivor somebody who, from the moment of diagnosis, we know that that's a term that a lot of people affected by cancer don't necessarily adopt, or they adopt it later on down the line, and we honor that and respect that. For our internal definition, and when you hear us talk about survivorship, we're talking about from the moment of diagnosis on.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not looking at therapies. We're not saying, oh, this is the greatest new, immunotherapy. This is the new chemo drug everybody wants to try. Our focus is improving the quality of life for anyone affected by cancer. And when I say anyone, I mean the entire ecosystem that gets disrupted when cancer gets thrown into the mix. So whether that's, I now have to leave my job because I can no longer work because of treatment, or I don't have the strength now after chemo to walk my dog. What do I do? These medications are so expensive. Which one do I buy? I don't have insurance anymore. What is this fatigue? All of these things that happen that impact your quality of life. Livestrong is there to provide resources, support, and specific programs and projects to improve those things.
So how do you think about that shift? So, like, I actually came out of biotech and health and everything. So I was at a lot
Mhm,
of those companies, creating the cancer medications and diagnostics. And so, and it's funny because when you said it was my first inclination, I was like, well, no, we've been talking about cancer for a long time and trying to combat it. And so, what is take me back then prior to the conversation. I think about things, culture shifts. I think about something like MAD,
yeah,
Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Right there was a very before, prior was okay. We don't drunk driving was not as socially unacceptable, and that was
mhm,
the culture shift that they made. I
mhm,
think in the realm that as you said, like we've been combating cancer for ever, right? Yeah, before we knew
yes.
had a word for it in that. So that obviously didn't shift. The money didn't shift, as you said. But so what was there a lack of resources from your perspective before on kind of the non-intervention side? Was it,
Mhm.
if it was hushed at parties and like, oh, she had like, so what did that mean in practice then? What was the cultural shift that occurred?
The cultural shift that occurred is connection, and that's why the wristband was so interesting, right? And it's why it was so profound, because suddenly people could say, I have cancer, put on a wristband and say, I've been affected by cancer. And you don't actually have to say it out loud now. Now, if you see me in the wild, right, at the airport or at the party, I can come up to you and have a conversation and know that you're a safe person to have a conversation with because you get it. I don't know what your story is, but you get it. Suddenly, people who had been affected by cancer, patients first, right? Suddenly, those people are now able to find another person that says, "Oh, yeah, you too? Me too. Tell me about your experience." It's that shared community that is so important and that is so unique and wasn't happening before. Because before, right, you whispered words. When Susan G. Komen, when Nancy Brinker started Komen, they weren't even allowed to write the word breast cancer in their first ad in the Dallas Morning News for the very first walk that they did to raise money to find it.
I didn't realize that they were also from Texas.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Yeah.
Do you
Texas is a pretty big
do you
deal.
see something there, like the fact that like both the not that there aren't other philanthropic organizations, but
Mhm,
uh, do you see something of why like that? I didn't. It's either doubt you guys are Austin, like something in the
mhm.
Texas air that makes this a little bit different and creates these type of organizations.
It could be the spirit of community, like I just kind of touched on, the spirit of saying, uh, we're gonna help one another. We don't build fences, right? Fences are for cows, not people.
I hadn't
So
heard that, but I like it.
so, you can, I mean, this is an Austin podcast, so I'll say it, but you can tell when people move here from other cities or other, around the country that don't share that same front porch mentality that we do
Hmm.
necessarily. And you see people putting up fences in their front yard. No, no. Fences are for cows and they're in the back. People are in the front. And so maybe it's the fact that communities, whether big or small, are really meant to be together and to support one another. And so when you find somebody or you meet somebody who has a similar experience than you or who's gone through some sort of trauma, Texas communities tend to stand up and say, okay, we got you. I may not understand it or I may have a similar thing, but what do you need? I'm going to bring you food first. I'm going to bring you food and how can I help?
I mean, it really is. I think embedded so much into everything because, like obviously, so I'm one of the people who moved from California, so I came here in 2020. Now I've embraced that, but I mean, like HEB is such a perfect example. Like, there's that picture that went
Mhm,
viral, whatever, when the floods, and you had like, no, HEB's on its way. It's like, okay, this is. I've never seen a grocery store anywhere else. Like, it's much more than that, right? And
yeah.
this, and then you see that kind of reflective nature back in the brand because, like, my kids are like, oh yeah, we gotta go to HEB, or like I was just in San Antonio and we had to stop at Bucky's on both directions. Like that is a must. And I was like, okay, it's something a little bit different here. There's no brands that I had that kind of like association with
Mhm,
or held on to in California versus here. it's not only one, it's obviously it's multiple brands and multiple kind of
Yeah.
community. And I've seen also just, when I raised my hand that I had moved here, I met people in Dallas and Houston and San Antonio. And I was like, okay, that's not what I thought. So there is that kind of sense of community and all kind of we're Texans.
Yeah, there really is, and it's not, I've lived all over too. So I've lived in Chicago, New York, I've lived in Dallas, other places, Fort Worth here in Texas, and Austin is very special, I think. But overarching, kind of why are there organizations like ours born in a state like this? And I think it does come back to this very grassroots community, know your neighbor.
How do you
And Mhm.
how do you think about then as you're building community, and that's one of the things that you're driving? Um, Obviously, the wristband was part of it was fundraising, of course. Like I'm not going to move away from that, but the like, how do you measure it? Like, how do you that like okay, we are creating community. Like, it's hard to be like, well, are people whispering anymore? That's not so easy of a quantifiable thing to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, that's a really great thing. It's interesting because donors, partners, are always asking, well, how many people are you impacting? And that can be a really tough number to know. I can tell you that we had 65,000 people on our landing pages, on our website, just last month. And if all those 65 happen to be people that were diagnosed, then you can add 5 people to each one of those humans as an ecosystem, right?
Hmm.
So we can multiply and do all kinds of math, but I think that the impact that we really see in the way that we like to measure impact is truly in the phone calls. It's truly in the emails that we get. It's truly in these one stories at a time, whether it's on social media. We've got 2 million people on social media who are consistently sharing stories. You see the yellow heart, you see the yellow wristband. They're thriving, they're living their best life, and they're looking for help and looking for answers, and we're able to provide that. So I think it's not as run of the mill necessarily or easy to count like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are. It's really
Hmm.
easy to tell somebody how many peanut butter and jelly sandwiches you made, but oftentimes the impact that we have isn't seen for almost decades. For example, we have a fertility program. When young people get diagnosed with cancer, they will have a finite amount of time in which they need to preserve fertility if they want to have hope for a future family.
Hmm.
This time period can be a week. It might be a month, but it's not much longer than that. The average price for a woman to preserve is $12,000. And in almost every state, with the exception of just 12, insurance doesn't pay for that.
Hmm.
So suddenly you have these massive cancer. You've got bills that are coming. You don't know that they're coming yet, but they're coming. And you have to come up with $12,000 ish right away in order to maybe have hope for a family later on. We created the fertility discount program. So we've got a network of over 150 fertility clinics nationwide that provide a really deep discount on those services. They have to in order to be a part of the network.
Hmm.
We've got a partnership with EMD Serona that provides free fertility medications for those same women. So stimulation medications like $4,500 if they were just to get it on their own. So significant savings to be a part of it. They preserve. We had 59 people last month get approved. 99 got actually had services last month through this program, but we won't see the impact of that for probably 5 years, a decade? It's hard to know, right? You I don't know when they're ready to have a family, and I can't necessarily track every single one of those people and the families, but I do know that we've provided hope to each and every one of them, and that
Yeah.
there are kiddos out there running around, and there are babies born, and there are families that are created because of what we're doing.
No, that's amazing. One of the questions then is, was you changing culture, and part of that was awareness, right, through the wristband. And of course, one of the things that happens when something is successful is it gets copied. So I
Uh,
can't, I don't know how many wristbands in that, like, 5 or 7, like, and you lost count of the colors. Like, wait, what is this one and what is that? And I mean, then like you see with pins, or like I joke, but like the joke right now is in startups, everyone's gonna have the really like high level, launch video where the things go, and so like it loses its value very quickly. So walk me through a little bit, like what did Livestrong think about when, not the second, but now we're at the fifth, and like the wristband craze kind of got to its peak.
yeah. So we have sold and distributed almost 100 million of these little guys. So there's a lot of wristbands in the wild out there for sure. And I think initially you saw two things, right? You saw culture prior to social media, right? There was no, we weren't Instagramming, nobody was influencing this. Oprah was social media at the time.
Right,
She really drove this really large launch, but we saw this kind of groundswell of connection. Again, saying there are two reasons people put the wristband on: one, because they were deeply connected to it, or two, because they wanted to, it was a little bit of FOMO. Everybody had to have the yellow wristband. A lot of people will talk to me now and say, "Oh, I remember stacking them on my wrists, and all the kids at school had to have them." So there was certainly a level of that fashion sense, and I've got to be cool.
right.
You see them in movies, all the time. When they throw back to the 90s, the wristband often shows up in period films.
I gotta think. I gotta be like, okay, the fact that she's called the '90s a period film is that's a whole
I
other
know.
problem.
Hey, I'm with you, man. I'm Gen X all day. So, um, yeah, it is. I think it is a period film now. So, so I think absent of those, right? The craze happens, and then everybody starts producing silicone wristbands, certainly. And people take the wristband off, just like if you're wearing wide leg jeans today. Well, I have the wide leg jeans that I was wearing. I was like 5 years ago when it was really cool, and then I just stuck them in the closet and waited for them to come back again. Um,
I'll take your word
it,
for it. My wife just
you
says,
don't
"Hey, I've
really
got
know.
clothes. Try them on."
I've got clothes, put them on. So I think there's certainly something to be said for style and trend, but that's not what our wristband stands for. And I don't think that any of the others stand for that either. What other causes and organizations found when they looked at our wristband and they said, oh my gosh, we've got to do the same thing. Look at how many people, if we could just get a third of those people wearing the wristband, it would be unreal. We would really be able to change things and really make a difference and bring awareness to the three-toed frog or the windmills or, saving dogs or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And so, certainly imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And
Oh, oh,
and
wait, oh!
uh,
You literally hit one of my favorite quotes of all time. That I learned. Do you know that's only half the quote?
no, tell me the other half.
That mediocrity pays to greatness. The quote's
Oh,
the quote is actually, it was
oh,
on this podcast. I learned this live. The quote is actually an insult.
wow, that is so interesting. Okay, well now I
I
have
speak to it a lot about
no.
the whole like Silicon Hills,
Uh-huh.
Silicon Slopes,
Mhm.
Silicon. I'm like, be your own thing, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it is, and not again, not to knock anybody that said we're going to make the wristband and these kinds of things, but like the the point being is that I remember the Livestrong wristband, and I remember that like then everybody had a wristband. I couldn't tell you any colors
Yeah.
or any of those kinds of things, and so then the question is like how do you pivot or remain connected to the narrative and break out and being like,
Mhm.
yes, everybody's doing it, but we're still, we're still first, or what it isn't always
Uh-huh.
happy first mover advantage. So it's like, how do you think about the break in that, right? Because you want to
Yeah,
be the greatness, not the mediocrity.
right. Definitely not the mediocrity. I think I think that comes with holding ourselves to a very, very high standard internally and saying, we are the OG of wristbands. And you can't take that away from us if you're looking for a little bit of status. But truly, the wristband was a lot more than just the piece of silicone. It was truly an outward form of expression to say, I got you. an outward form of connection.
So it's interesting because you did mention that, and I had forgotten that it was in the pre-social media age, and
Mhm.
obviously, like the ice bucket challenge was the perfect thing for like social media.
Yeah.
So how do you see that aware, like now in the social media age, and now actually even further in the AI age? It's always interesting to throw things into perplexity and be like, how, how deep is it getting? Is it known, right?
Mhm.
Like, is this? So
Mhm.
how are you trying to shift narrative in both the social media era and the now AI era?
Boy, is it a challenge. It
I told you,
it's
all simple
it's
questions.
very hard. Such easy questions. Thanks, Jason. What time is it? Okay, I need coffee. I will say this, you know, we have to be as brave as those who are fighting cancer. And so today what you see from us and our philosophy is I'm not interested in telling people where they need to go or how they need to act. Instead, we're going to be where they are and where they are already taking action. For instance, social media is a monster, and you know this as well, right? Do you hire the social media influencers? Which ones? How much do you pay them? Does that seem authentic or genuine or not? Can't we just get people to do this for free out of the goodness of their hearts? But they're doing this to make a living, and there's all of this challenge with social media. Um, so what we've decided to do is we're going to lean really hard into AI. We're leaning very hard into making sure that we are where people are already going. So TikTok, for example, I didn't know this. I've been taught this by our amazing marketing team. There is something called cancer talk, and so within the TikTok platform, there is a huge community of people who are working through a cancer diagnosis either themselves or with somebody else. And so when we created the first AI powered cancer survivorship companion, we're putting it on TikTok. Why? Because they're already there. I don't know TikTok. I don't need to know TikTok. I don't think. My son is 25 and I just don't want to know. But we're creating something so that when people stop Googling and they're searching chat or they're searching Claude, you're going to get Livestrong there because that's where people are. And we're not looking to change behavior like saying, we're not raising our hands and saying, you got to put the wristband back on or you need to go here. We're trying to meet people where they already are going to be or where they already are and not change their behavior, but give them the answers they need right there.
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, especially since we were talking about community in the beginning. Because if you see, obviously, Bowling Alone, I didn't realize was like 20 plus years old. I thought it was a much more recent book than that. And you see like the loneliness data and the loneliness epidemic
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
the second and third order effects that we're seeing for all of this. And so the question then is, are they actually communities that are being created? Like if I'm staring in my phone,
Mhm.
and I'm just as bad, and so like I'm not like like it's not the same. Like it's a different. In some ways, I say it's a different type of community. There's an interesting study that I had read because there's always this like, okay, well, if we make these walkable, dense neighborhoods, we're gonna solve these kind of loneliness epidemics and all of those things. And there was a study that came out that looked at the prevalence of loneliness in urban, suburban, small rural, and large rural. And the loneliest place was urban, then it was large rural, then small rural, and then the least lonely was suburban, which of course goes against everything that we like. Oh, like everyone's separated. It's now. I think my non-economics degree hat on this is that in suburban, like we have automatic communities that are created, right? Like I've met my kids, the parents of my kids' friends, right? The schools and those families create that. Um, there tends to be, I think, high. I don't have data, but this is just the gut, like religious services in the suburbs than the urban.
Mhm.
So it's an interesting thing to say, like, oh yeah, so we you have more people, you have a denser number of people in like the city. They don't actually. It's communities that we're lacking, right? It's the you want those kind of creative collisions to then have more like, the rotary, all those things like don't really exist so much anymore. And
Mhm.
so it's a long-winded way of saying then, like, if you're saying you're meeting them where they are, but is where they are, where they are, where the communities are. I get it's something different if it's merely like I'm trying to help you answer questions, right? Like I'll get you
Sure.
the information where you are. But as we
Mhm.
kind of went back, it's what's the communities that we're trying to help build.
Yeah. It's a you're absolutely right, and I think that the communities that we're trying to build are ones that trust us. Trust is a rare commodity today, and no matter where you sit on, the political spectrum or the conspiracy theory spectrum, or if you're getting your news from Facebook or Instagram or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, it doesn't matter. Trust is really the issue and that's the thing that we believe brings community together. So we say no one faces cancer alone, and that's kind of our internal talk around decision making. So when I talk about when we built when we built Ellis, Ellis, um, LS, say it out loud, Ellis. So when we built Ellis, the reason we called it a cancer survivorship companion is because that's exactly what it is. It's not a chatbot. It's a companion having a conversation with you, and you are meant to leave the conversation. We are, I want you to, I'm going to violate all of the marketing rules, and I want you to leave the site. I actively want you to go into your community where we have identified a trusted resource that solves the problem that you're having. So building trust for people to come to us and say, I don't know, I'm feeling isolated. We get that all the time, all the time. Cancer is isolating and has been since the beginning, right? Not only is it mentally isolating, but also physically. We during COVID, we said it's cancer, not COVID. People with cancer have been wearing masks for decades. It wasn't about COVID then, right? It's that
Mhm.
they were immunocompromised and they had to put the mask on. And so what we're doing is building a community that trusts one another and that trusts the resources that we're providing for them, trust the conversation that they're having, and then we're connecting them with hyper local, national, large scale, small scale organizations and
Whatever the
information
need
that they
is.
can trust. Yeah, correct, correct. But that's the community. And I think the key to building the community and the reason why suburbanites maybe are less lonely is because they trust one another because they're having a similar experience. Your kids go to the same school, so you have you all live on Kinney Street, or everybody works in the sale building, or whatever it is. You have community, you have that built-in community because you trust one another because you have a similar experience, and so that is what we're building.
So okay, so walk me. It's a good segue then. Walk me through Ellis. Like, what exactly
Yeah,
is it? And then I do want to get in bit into the development side of it too, because as we were
yeah,
saying kind of before we started this, I would not be expecting a philanthropic
no,
organization to be being the one to
mm,
kind of build an AI kind of care navigator
yeah,
or however you describe it. Like
yeah,
that's more of a startup type
yeah.
of thing. So
Yeah. Well, I certainly consider myself a little bit of an entrepreneur in everything that we do. And I think that's what Livestrong has been. And I absolutely embrace the idea of see a need, fill a need. So if we go back, kind of the evolution of Ellis happened because of the guidebook. So our Livestrong guidebook is a physical book, old school, right in the book, old school guidebook that's been around for 2 decades. We've updated it multiple times, and the book is meant to give to somebody or for somebody to use from the moment of diagnosis. And the first page is literally just diagnosed, and it takes you through everything to think about, talk about, write down what to ask your doctors. What about my insurance? I don't understand what is Cobra? What is this medication? How do I tell my family members? All of the things, the soft side, not the name of the medication that you take and what are its possible side effects. So we created this book, and about a year ago, we revised it, and and it came. I was very excited. We were super fancy. We put in QR codes this time so that we didn't have to continually update. We could just update the QR code, if the links changed. So literally, I get the first box, from the printer. It's on my desk. I open it up. I'm flipping it through, and my son calls. He's 25. My son calls, and he's like, just checking in. Good son. He's like, hey, mom, what's going on? I was so excited. I was like, oh, we just published this book. Told him all about the updated guidebook. And he said, who reads that? And I was like, well, people read it, like people who are just diagnosed with cancer. And he's like, is this like a real book, like a book? I was like, well, yeah, it's like a book. You wouldn't read the book? He's like, no, I wouldn't read the book. Can I get it on my phone? I guess, but it'd be really hard to do on your phone. So anyway, I hung up from this conversation, and I was like, okay, we created something for my parents. We created for something for Gen X, older Gen X, like
The
boomers. Like,
Thomas, the Thomas guide when GPS is everywhere.
Correct. And so I literally started having conversations the next day with people and saying, what can we do? What can we do? What if we didn't have the guidebook? What if the guidebook was on the website? What if the guidebook was in an app? Like, what could we do with that? Could it be like ChatGPT that had just, was really just getting some serious traction about, 12, 18 months ago? And what could we do? That's how Ellis was born, because I said, we've got to do better. And we found some great partners and builders to build with us. And that is how and why. Because, kind of going back, it's really important that my 25-year-old son and everybody in that age range, has the resources that they need and is able to access them in the way that they need, the way that they already are accessing information. And that's in a very different way than a physical printed guidebook.
So how is Ellis different than the guidebook? Like obviously we have the kind of capabilities now that,
Yeah,
you can go down some interesting different paths that you couldn't before.
you can. So Ellis is built on the guidebook. It knows the guidebook. What makes Ellis very unique is that it's closed. It is a closed loop AI, so it cannot hallucinate. Ellis only knows what I teach it.
Okay.
And that's super important because, again, I go back to trust. We're building communities that trust the information and the connections that we're providing for them to make their lives better, easier.
And
So
this is one of those scenarios where a mistake. I had an episode recently on vertical AI, and we're talking about like if there's 2% specificity matters, then you need to be building differently than the horizontal. And this is one of those cases where I think it's not so much say like you said, like if the drug is off in its creation, and like that has but this has the breaking of the trust issue. Like, oh well, you told me to go to XYZ and it hallucinated, and that thing doesn't exist. I'm like,
right.
Well, am I going to use this anymore? Like, it's not actually giving me the information that I need.
That's exactly right. And that's why it will always be closed. We can't allow it to go out into Googleverse and tell us the wrong things, send us to broken links. We don't want that to happen. And so everything that Ellis knows and learns is curated information from partners that are vetted, information that is evidence-based, delivered in an empathetic way. So this isn't the American Airlines chatbot that's saying, I need to cancel my reservation, or what the heck is happening in Denver. Is what is happening in Denver. Don't fly out of Denver. Anyway, what is happening in
it feels like there was a specific thing that caused that.
Always late. It's always late out of Denver. Anyway, there's always weather in Denver.
But there is an interesting hallucination thing. I think if you heard the big lawsuit, I don't remember if it was Delta or somebody, where the chatbot gave some like ridiculous like refund kind of situation, and then Delta was held liable. They said, yes, this is what you gave put out there, and they interacted. So
This is
yes,
what
you
you
need to pay
said.
this. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so it is interesting on the hallucination side. But then, how do you how do you keep it up? Because now, since it's not the guide, and you have obviously flows coming in, I
Mhm.
assume the up to date nature can be much more robust and fast.
Yeah, it can be much more robust and fast. In fact, if we took a look at an article that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, for instance, JAMA. So
Hmm.
these are all peer-reviewed, evidence-based articles. And if something comes out today, let's say it's an exercise study, right? There was one that was just published out at ASCO in May. So we're going to take the contents of the study that talks about the benefits of exercise and how it reduces mortality after a cancer diagnosis. So we're going to take that study. I'm going to teach it to Ellis. It's as simple as literally uploading this document, and I've sourced it. So everything that Ellis provides to you will have the source so that I want you to go read the source. It will summarize the article and then it will send you directly to the link so you can read the full article if you'd like to. But keeping that up to date is really important, and it falls on us to do that.
Well, how do you think about, because you are, for lack of a better term, becoming the gatekeeper into Ellis, the problems that we're having right now in the academic literature, whether it be the replication crisis, whether it be lack of null set, publications, because who's going to publish? No, this is not right, right? Because there's no value. Like, it
Mhm.
doesn't really help your H score then. To just, I mean, we've seen like in Alzheimer's, right? Like the amyloid crisis of like, oh yeah, well, that was fraudulent. And so that whole
Yeah.
gamut of where we're going through obviously a serious crisis right now in this. And two, just we don't know. I mean, one of the things that, so I was at a microbiome solutions company a number of years ago, and just to show you the wild west nature of it, there was like when I started there was a publication that said, odd microbiomes cause autism, and then 6 months later, also in Nature, it was no, other way around. Uh, Autism creates odd diets, which then creates odd microbiomes. My very medical terms there. But and so the point was that like the answer was we don't know. Like clearly there's correlation, causation is a little bit more unknown. And so how are you doing then the human filtering of saying like, okay, well there's this exercise study, or I remember something in particular. There was something that happened there. There was a linkage between the microbiome and how well chemotherapy does. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And of course, one of my first concerns out of that was that someone's going to run and say like, oh, if you just fix your microbiome, you'll cure the cancer. I'm like, no, like that's a misinterpretation of what that like. It's a correlation. We don't know what exactly it is. So how are
Right.
you acting as that gatekeeper in, and then that creating that trust, right?
Yeah. It's a really great question, and one of the things that I love about our organization, we're nimble, we're small, mighty, and we're able to pivot fast. So I'm a big fan, just like any entrepreneur, of launching an MVP and building the plane and adjusting and pivoting as we're flying. So what I can tell you, because of I have very we have very strong swim lanes. So our pool has solid edges, and mission drift is so real for so many nonprofits. And I've been in this business
Oh
now.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes. Like back
yeah,
for why does MAD still exist? They won. They changed the culture. That
yeah.
organization should
They
not
did it.
exist anymore.
Yeah, they did it. They did it. So mission drift is a thing, and I have put very hard guardrails around our mission. So when we talk about clinical information, you won't hear clinical information from us. What you will hear, so if you were to ask Ellis, hey, these are the medicines that my doctor prescribed, what do you think about them? Or can you tell me about them? Ellis is not going to tell you about them. Ellis is going to respond, or better respond, should respond in saying, thanks for sharing that. Let me get you to a place that, or let me send you here where you can go learn about those. And we're going to send you to, the FDA, or a link to an AMA site that talks about um, that particular drug where the latest studies live. It is There is absolutely, at least today, I don't believe a way possible for us to be the gatekeeper of all information that has to do with cancer. We just can't.
Right.
So instead, our swim lane is quality of life, and that's where we're going to sit. So if you come to me and say, if you come to Ellis and say, I heard you can't eat tomatoes while I'm taking this drug, Ellis might say, um, I may have heard that too. I may have heard that too. But let me get you to this nutritionist. Let me get you to this nutrition site where you can learn more about a potential conflict with tomatoes and your drug. So,
So is
mhm.
Ellis answering questions then, or is
Oh yeah,
every action ending with pointing somewhere?
no, Ellis definitely answers questions. So
Okay.
Ellis can answer questions like, how do I file for my insurance, or what uh, can my landlord really kick me out? Does Is this covered under Medicaid? Is How do I plan a will? How do I tell my family I'm lonely? Ellis absolutely answers questions like that. What other questions should I ask my doctor? You're going to get answers. Absolutely, you'll receive answers. 30 years worth of work in this field, and we've got volumes and volumes of answers inside. But when it comes to things that are outside of those swim lanes, right? If it is an quality of life issue and you're talking about something that requires expertise outside of that, then I'm going to send you to a person or an organization that we trust and we've vetted, because we know that when you get the answer you need, you're going to come back to the community. You're going to come back to this community of trust. And when you have the next question.
You even said like one of the things was lonely, and one of the issues we're beginning to see now with the LLMs is the overly agreeable sycophantic nature of it. Like, you're
Yeah.
amazing, or they. I mean, I even had
Yeah.
times like do the voice like,
Yeah.
that's a great question. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't need this. Like, just answer the question.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and like, there's this because we talk about like again building the community. We have the loneliness epidemic in general, and then I would assume back to where we started with that having cancer, any debilitating or life threatening disease creates again. I Who knows what I'm going through? No one knows, right? Like that kind of just general feeling.
Yeah.
So when tuning, like, how are you thinking about the line between being compassionate and empathetic and being sycophantic, right?
Yeah.
And how are you tuning that?
We're tuning it every day. How are we thinking about that? We're thinking in that we're building Ellis and have built Ellis to be an evidence-based, empathetic companion and somebody, an agent to have a conversation with that feels real. Ellis's responses to things it may not know will be things like, wow, that's a tough one, or that must be hard. Ellis does not say, you're amazing, great question. It doesn't do that the way that some of our other some of our other agents do. I always laugh at the emojis that I get. I'm like, are you really? I'm getting emojis now.
I've had to put in custom instructions into me. I'm like, unless I'm like, you're helping me with like a social media post, please do not give me emojis. Like,
Yeah, I don't need the emojis. Yeah.
but it's interesting when we think about like the training of these things. Like we know about
Yeah.
Delve, we know about the M dashes. The
Hmm.
number of times I put it in custom instructions, I put it in memory, and it still overrides it, and still will be like, oh, here I'm telling you this. I'm like, why did you give me emojis again? Why did you use the word Delve and all these kind of things?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and I'm curious if you can go into a little bit like, is this? I mean, are you using one of an API into one of the foundationals? Like, how is it that this is being built? And then if that is the kind of pulled in and then being tuned on top of that, how are you dealing with that?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And if my developers were here, they could give you all of the tech. They could explain the tech stack a whole lot better than I can. But I can tell you that um, it is very clear to them, and it is very um, part of part of the purpose of this. is to have Ellis feel compassionate without being ingratiating. It is to, we check it every single day. I can see those chats in real time. I can go on right now and tell you I don't know who's talking, but I could see their IP address, which means nothing to me. But I can tell you what this person asked, and I can see Ellis's response to that. This gives me literally daily the opportunity to go in and say, wow, I didn't really like that answer. You know, that answer was vague, or they used an emoji clearly. Currently, the current version of Ellis does not have deep memory. So Ellis currently Ellis is beginning to recognize you, Jason, as you come back. Be like, oh, hey, Jason, it's great to see you again. How can I help you today? But currently, in the form we have right now today, Ellis is not going to remember HIPAA information because that's very important to me. We are not going to store your confidential
As
information.
it also creates some regulatory challenges.
I have no interest in that. So we will very highly likely won't be delving into the delve. There's that word you didn't want. So we won't delve into
We
that.
are allowed to use it. It just now becomes such a there's the people who used to love using M dashes to write, and they're like, the AI has killed it because now anybody sees it.
It has killed it.
Maybe I used it before.
I know, it's so funny. I do the same thing. I'm like, oh, I would normally use the dash, but I'm not using the dash because they're going to think that the AI wrote it. So right now, what I can tell you is that we are in 100% control of everything that Ellis says. We literally look at it every single day, monitor those responses, and ensure that while it may remember you, Jason, it's not going to remember, that you said your diagnosis was ABC. It might remember that you said you were going to get chemotherapy and offer you some side effect information. Hey, you might be feeling fatigued. One way to help battle that is through exercise. Can I hook you up with an exercise program that's near you? That's the type of interaction that we built Ellis for.
Now, on the flip side, the stickiness, and one of the things that I think is extremely powerful with these kind of, chatbots, companions, whatever you want to call it, right? This is, I love that ChatGPT has memory, right? Because I'm able to build on the things that I want to build off of and be like, oh, do you remember? Now, there's some issues, of course, with like, no, you're taking the last 4 conversations, which I cared about that in the last 4 conversations, but that is not the overwhelming thing. So like, it has work to do. So, I mean, do you see? I mean, you don't want HIPAA, you don't want all this information, and I get that, but at the same time, is that not maybe what I want is like, give me, my little care navigator on my shoulder who knows me better than anybody else and says like, great, I got this. Not only do I know the HIPAA related things, but like, I don't like cooked tomatoes, and you may have said the quality of life things come in, like, don't give me those. I don't like them, and just ignore that, right? Yeah. Everything from just preference stack to, hey, you're allergic, kind of to this stuff, and we'll never kind of go down that path.
Yeah, I think, what we're talking about is what the evolution looks like. What I love about this and what I love about the technology and what we're building is that there is that evolution. It's not, we haven't decided this is what it's going to look like, absolutely without fail. And, here's the pinpoint. Instead, we're evolving just as fast, I think, as the technology itself is evolving. We're trying to balance memory with HIPAA. How do you do that? I want it to remember that it's you, and I want it to remember that you hate tomatoes. I just don't want it to know your age, your address. I don't want it to know what you're taking. I don't want it to know all of those things or to remember those things, but it does come in handy. I'm planning a trip, so I put into ChatGPT, here's all the confirmations I have, and now I have this itinerary. It's not in the order that I want it in, but that's a whole nother thing, right? Like, I have to learn how to write those instructions just a little bit better. So
how quickly are things? You're like, oh, it's not perfect yet. You're like, a year ago, what were you even doing in this?
I know.
How quickly
I had my notepad with my, like I was printing everything out. I
Oh,
was using my guidebook.
we use deep research when we're going to go on vacation. I'm like, hey, tell me these, find the
Oh
restaurant,
yeah.
all this stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Ellis will continue to evolve. How is it going to move? Like one of the things on our roadmap is around our care teams. So we talked earlier about kind of this ecosystem and this community. So go back to the community. It's not just you that's being affected by the fact that you have cancer. So for me, my mom was just diagnosed with breast cancer. When that occurs, it's not just her. It's my dad, myself, my sister, my son, my niece and nephew. It's everybody in all of her friends that are in the ecosystem. So part of what's on our roadmap is connecting Ellis to them as well, and for Ellis to know that they're connected to you.
So it does really become, yeah, you said interconnected. It becomes each individual,
Hmm.
this
Yeah,
person, Susan's Ellis bot, Jason's Ellis bot, and so forth.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
funny because you're using words that you usually don't see or hear from a philanthropic organization. You even talked about
yeah.
the issues of drift.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes we can go the extreme, otherwise a bureaucratic rot. Like you see large institutions just become about maintaining the institution, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, I mean, so one, how how much have you been kind of doing this in house versus kind of finding the right technological partners and it's mission aligned, or is it no, we are kind of we're a nonprofit, but now we're also a tech building company.
So we're definitely doing things a little bit different, and and I we have found a lot of success here so far. So I've been in this industry for a very long time, and exactly what you've just mentioned are the things that I see, and I'm focused on building away from those. So one of the things that we see is this dependence on donor dollars.
Mhm.
And you hear the same asks over and over again, right? Oh my gosh, this year we need another $100,000. This year we need another $25,000. This program will go away if we don't get enough donations. Hurry, hurry, mail it in. We'll send you stickers. We'll send you a T-shirt, whatever it is, right? And that is just not sustainable, because the moment the donor, the moment the corporate partner, the moment the foundation or the government funds dry up, that program ceases to exist, or it comes under crisis. And that is not a sustainable way to run an organization. You wouldn't do that if you were running a for-profit organization instead of a social impact organization,
Mhm.
right? A for-profit organization, you've got your business plan and your business model, and you're sticking to that, and there's revenue at the end of that. That's how you sustain. You have to drive revenue. So we're building things inside of Livestrong today that are little micro businesses, and those are our mission programs. The goal is that each one of these becomes a self-sustaining entity, so that when a donor comes in, a corporate partner comes in, a family foundation comes in, we've got the machine set up so that there's revenue generating. So the fertility program I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
our fertility clinics contribute. They have to contribute in order to be a part of our network financially.
Mhm.
That support helps us fund the program, so that when donations come in, we're able to serve more people, not just the same people, the same number over and over again. We're able to
It's
scale.
scaling dollars rather than maintenance dollars.
Exactly, exactly. So Ellis is the same way. Our fertility program, our exercise oncology program, Cancer Fit, everything that we're doing and building there is are these little mini businesses inside. And and we're building it that way because we have to move quickly. So impact at scale, that's the goal. Impact at scale. We have a small team. We hire contractors out. We are not going to become an AI, we're not going to become a tech company. What I have found is when you
Building
keep
AI
your
products we found is takes a little bit of capital.
little bit of capital. And so instead we find the partners, the contractors, the people who are expert in this. We're investing there. And then when that piece is finished, we're able to say thank you. right? So we have and move on to the next expert. One of the challenges in this industry is that I can't pay you what you're worth, generally speaking, right? I can't get the smartest policy person from Harvard, right? I can't get the best developer from Google. I can't do it because I don't have my whole budget wouldn't pay for that.
Hmm.
One human being if I was to bring on an FTE. So instead we're able to the plan is and what we're doing is we built a small core team and then we have just as many contractors as I have FTEs and we build and grow, and that's how we're scaling. So we're scaling through contract work. We won't become a tech company. Um, we're using tech to scale our impact.
Is this coincidence, or do you think this is something's going on right now? Because like the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, got started investing directly in companies. The American Cancer Society launched their VC arm. So these very established philanthropic organizations are changing their models or adding to it, whatever how you say, but like it's not necessarily business as usual anymore. Is there
Yeah.
something you see, kind of a broader trend that is causing this movement, or is it just like I happen to be cherry picking and I've seen these things, but you look at overall, it's not so changed.
So I think it's both. Those organizations and those social impact organizations that embrace change and understand what they're seeing in the landscape and just look back the last 5 years. The instability in the economy, the instability in giving, the changes in the tax laws. First you couldn't give, then you can. $2,500 is deductible. You're never going to write it. You can't write it off if you don't give at least 2,500. It's going to mean the small donor goes away. Now that's back again. There are so many things that are out of our control in this sector. And giving is the primary way we survive, is the individual donor who's giving us $10 at a time. And that's really hard. That is selling a little widget for $10 and saying, I've got to sell 8 million of these in order to, whatever it is, every year to sustain. The social impact organizations with nonprofit status who see the writing on the wall and have seen the writing on the wall and have decided to do something and move and change their model, those are the ones that will survive. And especially today, I can't tell you, I can't count on every digit I have of people I personally know whose nonprofits have closed. They've scaled back. They've had to lay off everybody because of the shift in government funding. You've heard this. I'm not the first one to say this, but nonprofits begin where government ends, and that's this beautiful marriage that our ecosystem has been working under for a very long time. Well, the government just backed way the heck up, and nobody in the nonprofit sector was prepared or ready for that. And this massive gap now that exists, whether you are a plant, a person, or an animal, right? Whichever bucket you put your passion in, nobody is prepared for that fast and that quickly. And it highlights how vulnerable our organizations are when you are not built for the future.
I think that last sentence is probably the key, right? Is that so many of these organizations don't have to change. Don't have to, even back to as I said, we talked about the drift and some of these things. Some of these organizations, again, they exist to exist, right? Like such an institutional problem we have. It's not just not problem, like it's an institutional problem we have in general,
Mhm.
right? And so, in change, you see innovation, right? Like back to the point that you've made, like you're seeing this shift in people starting to innovate in different ways, building products, doing VC, whatever they may be doing. One of the questions I want to think about is we're kind of going all the way back to the beginning where we talked about, like, you being in Austin. I didn't know that the foundation was up in Dallas, and especially building AI and the kinds of stuff that you're building. I mean, do you see, like, how does being based in Austin and the pivots and changes that you're starting to make affect you? One, like, are you getting access to talent here through the contractors or whatever it may be to build the kinds of things that you want to build because we're doing that? And the second is, do you see Austin as a pilot deployment, like area to kind of test these things in, or is it like you just happen to be here and you start elsewhere?
So I think it's really all of those things. The fact that we're here in Austin, great example. Literally 2 days ago, I I needed to solve a problem or start to think about how to solve a pretty big one, something that's way out of my area of expertise in the healthcare and Medicaid side. So nothing that we've talked about here today, but really I have some questions I need to understand better, and I need some people who are really creative thinkers, but also understand how health systems work. I put out 2 phone calls to people who are here in Austin who are experts, and the network just opens up. What is great about Austin is not only do we have a network of very talented human beings, very smart human beings, there are people who are really very, very willing to open the door and say, "Ooh, I know somebody who can help. Oh, let me connect you with my friend who he's better at this than I am, right? Or she is the expert down in Baylor, or you've got to talk to this guy in Houston." That that is something that is special about Austin and all the other towns that I've lived in. I've never experienced the the networking, and that's a kind of a icky word often, right? Networking. I don't want to go to another networking event. But it's the trust that you build here in Austin with some really smart people. So not only is the knowledge here, we also have risk takers here, right? That entrepreneurial spirit is almost palpable when you go to any event. You're going to sit at a table at 10, and there is no way you don't have a founder or someone who just exited or someone who's got the greatest next idea at your table. And
Mhm.
that's a pretty cool place to begin. So from an incubator standpoint, we 5 years ago we co-founded a startup called We Are Here. And this was before Chat GPT. And we said, what does the next version of patient navigation look like for cancer patients and clinicians? And today We Are Here is still going, and it's based in Austin. And the reason it's based here is because of the people who are here.
Well, I think that's a great place to kind of get to the same question I ask everybody at the end. What's next, Austin?
What is next? I would say next Austin is a really big adventure into changing the way healthcare is delivered and the way people live with cancer.
So, what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.